Good morning. It is early February, and this is my little Harbor Freight greenhouse, and it is a total mess. But I do still have things growing. So I've still got, and this is just what's inside. I still have lettuce, mache. I've still got some squash left over, and I've got a lot more than this inside. Most of these are probably frozen once or twice. They may not be good for me, but they'll be good for the chickens or for the compost. Got more lettuce up there, got a few starts, and I just started some more things. Okay, so obviously I am not a great videographer here. I'm not going to try to be. I'm not going to do a lot of effects and stuff like that. I'm just plain talking. This video, I have no idea how long it's going to be, so I'm not going to say it's going to be a short one. But this time of year, there's on all the gardening Facebook groups and whatever other social media you're in, it's the time where people are wanting, they're itching to start their garden. And maybe a lot of people are itching to start their first garden. They've never gardened whatsoever in any way, and they'll put a post someplace like, I want to start gardening, what do I need to do? You know, something about that simple. It sounds like a very simple question, but like anything in life, it can be a lot more complicated than that, especially if you want to actually achieve success. Now, first of all, there's no such thing as instant success, okay, unless you've got a lot of money and having other people do it for you. So if you want Charles Dowding's garden within the first 2 months of spring and for $10, the only way you're going to get anything that looks like that is to print it out and post it up on your wall, okay? He's been doing this 30, 40, 50 years. So, and I guarantee you his gardens, the first 2 years, didn't look anything like they do now. Or P. Allen Smith, or anybody like that. There's no instant success if you're doing it yourself and you're actually learning. So, anyway, I looked online I've got some of my own questions that I would ask somebody, and then I kind of grabbed a few online just to kind of help. I'm going to start reading through these, and again, I have no idea how long this is going to last. I don't know what the sounds from the traffic and stuff are going to be like, but I'm just going to kind of go through each of them and read it out and give you some of my thoughts. So, again, let me back up just a little bit. If you put a post out someplace, if you ask a question and somebody comes back to you with a very specific thing or a couple of things to do and they can fit it in about 3 sentences, nod your head, thank them for their advice, and keep looking. Because there is no one way to garden. There are as many ways to garden as there are people, plants, locations, weather conditions, wants, needs, abilities, financial situations. So I think that there are some that are more liable to have a success. But in order to have success, you also need to know what does success mean for you. Anyway, I'm going to start going through some questions. Probably the absolutely first and most important question to ask and to be able to answer is, what's my purpose in starting a vegetable garden? It says vegetable gardening, that's what I'm most familiar with, but it could be a flower garden, it could be an herb garden, it could be a sensory garden, whatever. So what is my purpose in wanting to start a garden? Okay, let's take vegetable gardening. Are you wanting to do it because you want to be outside? Do you have one or more young children that you want to, maybe you didn't get to do this, but you want to start a family tradition, having an activity that you can do with your children? Maybe you're concerned about your diet and their diet, and you have learned that and listen to people that say, you know, have looked at this and see that kids that grow vegetables tend to eat vegetables. So rather than just buying vegetables, maybe in a can or frozen or in a TV dinner or something, sticking it in front of the kid and trying to get them to eat it, maybe growing it instead. So it could be a health issue, it can be a diet issue, it can be a family togetherness issue. It can be you're concerned about the environment and you want to do local food as much as you can. It can be because of rising food costs. Not so much, I mean, almost anybody can get calories. So even in the so-called food deserts, I like one definition, I think it's one of the governmental definitions of the food desert, is it is more than 1 mile on foot to a source of healthy fresh food, fresh vegetables, things of that nature. That may be a governmental definition, so we've got to have a definition. I kind of like it. There's another definition somebody came up with I like a little bit better. If in order, maybe in addition to the other one, if in order to get to fresh, healthy food, you have to walk past, say, 3 non-healthy sources, be they quick stops, gas stations, dollar burgers, tacos, something of that nature. Fast food, greasy food, processed food. If there's more than 3 of those, just arbitrary number, between you and a source of healthy food, maybe that, and you're on foot, especially, or a bicycle, that may be a food desert. So maybe, you can buy all the tater logs, all the fried spring rolls, all the, 1.5 Mountain Dews, my favorite, you want, and you can even get them on Wick and Snap and all these kinds of things. But to go to a store and buy the healthy stuff, it's more expensive. So, a bag of leaves are more expensive than a Coke and a couple of spring rolls. Something's wrong with that. So, why are you interested in it? And let that really, really guide. Don't get distracted by Pinterest posts if they divert you from what your primary goal is. If it's a sensory garden, then just keep that in mind. If it's relaxation, whatever. Okay, why start now? What's the impetus? And that's basically what I was just saying. Is it health, food cost, environmental reasons, something? Write this down. Really write it down and keep that in front of you. How much money do I want to spend on my garden? Okay, literally, what is your top dollar that you are willing to spend to do this? I mean, you really can do it as cheaply, or you can spend as much money as you want. If you've got the room and you've got the money, you could do a top-of-the-line, fully automated greenhouse with, bottom wicking beds and automated, watering and temperature control, and you could have brought in Vermont compost even if you live in Hawaii. You can spend as much as you want. On the other hand, if you've got access to any land whatsoever, if you're in a rental, a lease, a house, trailer park, and you've got any soil around you, if you're in an apartment and you can find any kind of container whatsoever, plastic buckets, coffee cans, soda pop bottles you cut off, you can take a soda pop bottle, cut it in half, take the top half, put it down inside the bottom half, you've got a planting container. You've already got those because you or somebody around you is buying sodas. There's containers. I mean, in a real pinch, you can have soil, you can make a potting mix. There's all kinds of things you can do on that. And as far as seeds, you can go to the dollar store. Sometimes they'll have the seed packets for 25 cents. Folks, they're the same seeds. A lot of these big companies get all their seeds from the same place. So, you know, a Kentucky Wonder pole bean seed and burpee, you know, packet, very likely, once grown out, absolutely no difference than the one, whatever the brand is at your dollar store. Okay? Same thing. So if you're really trying to do it on a budget, don't worry about it. There are a lot of things that you can grow. I mean, if you go into the store and you buy a pound bag of black beans or kidney beans or whatever, if you're in the right area to grow those, man, you know, it's $1 or $2 at most for a 1 or 2 pound bag. Take 5 or 10 of those if you want to start small. Plant those, eat the rest. They're seeds, okay? There's a lot of things. If you just want to do ornamentals, if you're not really worried about food, you can use bird seed that's usually got sunflowers in there and some other kind of millet and other kinds of seed in there. You can go in the spice aisle. A lot of times there's whole seeds in the spice aisle. So if you use that anyway, if you do or can use fennel, or maybe you go to a friend's house that does a lot of cooking and they've got one of those jars, you know, of fennel seed or whatever it is, grab a few of those. You can give it a try. There sometimes are seed banks or seed libraries. Like I live in Marion, Arkansas, across the river from Memphis. And over in Memphis at the big central city library up on the 3rd floor, they've got an old card catalog. If you don't know what a card catalog, you're a lot younger than me. But anyway, it's a set of drawers. And there are packets and packets and packets of seed that people have donated there. And you can just go up there, and they prefer you to sign in, you know, fill out a little information sheet and stuff. And the goal is you can borrow seed and stuff, and then you will replace that. Either you grow it, save the seed, put it back, or you will bring some other seed at some point or while you're there the first time. But basically, you can go up there, open the drawer, find some tomato seeds, some cucumber seeds, some squash seed, or whatever, go home and plant it. If there are the county extension office, you might be able to hook you up with something, or hook you up with some people, some master gardeners. Start a local gardening Facebook group, and you might be able to find somebody that will trade you or give you seeds. There's any number of ways. You don't even have to have seeds. You can find somebody, maybe a gardener that has, let's say you want basil, and there's somebody in your area that's a keen gardener and stuff, and they've got basil. You can take a little snip off of that, root it, and have a basil plant. That's another way to start with one basil plant, and you can just propagate that out and make lots and lots. So there's many ways to do this on a budget. You can, as far as how you grow, you can do it in containers, straw bales. You can do it in ground, raised bed. There's just so many different ways. And the plant, as far as like containers, the plant has no idea if it's in a store-bought, plant cup, or a planter or a pot or whatever, and a coffee can. It has no idea. As long as there's not herbicides or some kind of chemical that's going to hurt it, residue in there, it doesn't know, it doesn't care. So there's many ways of doing that. But again, set your budget, and then don't go above that, because then it'll suck the joy out of it. Okay, here's another big one. How much time do I have to spend caring for my garden? Start small. If you've never gardened, just start small, because you can get overwhelmed. The energy of the early spring can have you digging up 2,000 square feet of your backyard, if you have it, or more. And while you've got all that energy and the weather is great, and all this kind of stuff, you get that garden out, whatever style it is, you get it out there. And then in about a month or 2 months, when you're new at it, you're probably going to have a lot of weeds. That's normal. Don't worry about it. It happens. You're going to have a lot of weeds to worry about, or it's going to get really dry and it's going to need watered, and you don't have an irrigation system, which is normal. Again, you don't have to have one, but it will require you out there with a hose or some way to water it, or the bugs are getting bad, or it's just, beaten down heat, any number of reasons. And now you've got this huge area to try to take care of. And if you're not able to do that, you're going to feel like a failure. It's going to suck all the fun out of it, and you're not going to get a whole lot out of it, and so next year it's going to be just, why bother, it's not worth it, gardening's not for me. And that really boils down to, you tried to do too much and you didn't have the time to maintain it. It's much better to have, and this is a 55-gallon plastic barrel that I cut the end off. I can cut them in half or something and make a planter out of it, use it for a lot of things. It's much better to have this close to the front or back door in a good place with a mixture of plants and have the success. It's amazing how much you can grow out of something like this. And then next year, you'll have a little bit more knowledge, and you might be able to double or triple this space. And just keep incrementing as you learn what you want to grow, how to grow it, how to take care of it, and things of that nature. So, you know, if you're working 110 hours a week, and you're leaving before, you know, dawn, and you're getting home after dark, it's gonna be kind of hard to do an outdoor garden. I'm not gonna have the time and the energy either. Okay, another thing, if it's a vegetable garden, what do you like to eat? It does no good to plant something you don't like. For me, if I was going purely for myself, to put out a 50-foot bed of radishes makes no sense. I, for the most part, don't like a lot of radishes. I mean, the only way I like them is if they're cooked. So I tend to do the daikon radishes instead of the little red ones for me, because one of them's big enough that I can cut it up like a turnip or like a potato or something like that and cook it, and I like it. So if I don't like it, or somebody in your family doesn't like it, and it's a food, don't grow it. Also, do you know how to cook it? You know, maybe you love sweet potato pie, so you want to grow some sweet potatoes. Well, do you know how to pick them, how to cure them, and then how to turn that potato into a sweet potato pie? Maybe this is when you learn. Maybe you need, if you plant them, maybe you need to go buy some and start practicing how to make that sweet potato pie, so that when yours are ready to harvest, you can then use yours potatoes in your sweet potato pie. Or you can, if you don't know what a kohlrabi is, or you don't know how to use it in some way to eat, then maybe it's a cool looking plant, and if you want to grow it for ornamental reasons, that's perfectly good too. But if you're growing it for food and you don't like it or don't know how to eat it or prepare it, maybe you need to use that space for something else. What would I enjoy most? Will you get or need any help? Okay, if you have a spouse or a partner and or family members, and you're kind of counting on them, so you go out there and you set up that 1,000 square foot garden expecting everybody in the house to help you, make sure before you do that, because they may not be into it, and you may not be able to cajole them into helping that much, and now you've got this huge garden that you're trying to take care of yourself. If you don't know for sure that you've got the help, and you don't have the experience trying to maintain a large, intensive garden, start small, and do kind of the Tom Sawyer, I believe it, or Huck Finn, I think it's Tom Sawyer version of do it, make it look fun, make it look enjoyable, and then one or more of those family members may get curious and decide to help. You may have a lot more success that way than if you're trying to badger them into doing it. But don't count on it unless you know you can count on it. Here's one of mine that I wasn't online, but do you take long or frequent multi-day trips? Okay, do you tend to, in early summer, go out of the country for a month? Well, if you got that garden rocking and rolling, what's going to happen to it in a month? Do you have somebody that you trust to maintain that garden, so when you come back, it's not overgrown and just absolutely full of overripe vegetables that now you got to find something to do with? Even if you don't go away for a month, maybe you tend to go away for 3 days at a time, once a month, for whatever reason, work, pleasure, whatever, and you've got tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, and you've got okra and zucchini starting to come off the vine, and you leave for 3 days. Those need to be picked. Okay? What part of your yard gets full sun, as in 6 to 8 hours? What part of your sun gets the least amount of sun, and in between? So some plants need full sun, lots of it. Some need less sun, they need full or partial shade. Some plants do better with early morning sun, but they really can't handle a really hard, hot west sun, especially like in my area. In the afternoon, that west sun will just bake stuff. So maybe I can get them 6 to 8 hours, but just not on the end of the day. I need that 6 to 8 hours on the front end of the day to dry the leaves off and stuff. So there's a lot that can go into deciding where you can plant. And it doesn't have to be a garden plot. Everything doesn't have to be all one. You can do more of an edible landscaping thing where maybe you've got a few things or a few containers that need full sun in the area that's full sun, but you might have something, another part of your garden in a flower bed, maybe on the north side of the house. Okay, for instance, hostas, pretty plants, great for a shady area, and they're edible. Okay, well, you can plant those on the north side of the house, which is great for them, and it looks like an ornamental planting, but it's food. You might be able to put some other things in there as well. So spread your garden plants in your ornamental beds. If there are things that you use frequently, if you love to cook and you use a lot of fresh spices, and you tend to drive in and go in and out the back door, and that back door is a fairly sunny place, put your herbs right there by the back door, or whatever door is closest to your kitchen. That way they're accessible. Okay, so you can spread things around, but know what part of your yard does what. Okay, what is your soil like? And I'm going to call it soil. I'm going to be kind, because a lot of soil is actually just dirt. What color is it? What does it smell like? How does water penetrate? Whether you pour it right on top, or whether you dig a hole and fill the hole, how long does it take for that water to go through? It's basically a percolation test. Is there any hard pan or a compaction layer? Where? How do you find out? It's going to have a huge impact on how much water is able to soak in, how often you have to water, how far the roots can go down before they hit something and have to go off to the side. The sooner they have to go down and go to the side because of the compaction layer, probably you're going to have to space the plants apart farther because they're going to be competing a little bit. Whereas if you don't have that compaction layer, or it's, you know, foot, 2, 3, 4, 8 feet deep, then those roots can keep going down, and you can bunch those garden plants up more intensively, less space, but still get a lot of production. Are there any worms or other critters in the soil? So if you dig down in there, you know, how many shovelfuls do you have to pull out before you can find a worm, before you can find a grub, before you can find anything living? And I'm not even talking about going to the point of pulling out a microscope and looking for the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, things of that nature. I'm talking about, you know, eye visible ones. What's your soil like? Any possible contamination? If you live up in some of the urban industrial north, where a lot of houses were built in the 30s and 40s and maybe painted with lead paint, now those houses may be gone, but that lead over the years, as they scraped them and repainted, may be in the soil. So the soil may look good, it may even smell good, it may percolate good, but it may have lots of heavy metals, lead, and stuff of that nature. So it doesn't mean you can't garden there, but you may have to, because of that, go to raised beds, containers, or some other form of gardening. But you need to know that, because the last thing you want is to be growing, especially like root vegetables and things like that, in that soil, pull them out, feed them to your kids, and they got heavy metals in them. Any herbicides, pesticides? Are you in a new subdivision? Because a lot of times they'll take a subdivision, and if it's actually good soil, then it's going to be too soft to build on, because they need a certain amount of compaction to be able to build a structure on safely. So all the good soil, they may have carted off and then brought in fill, rabble, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to be good for compaction and for building structures, but it's not going to be good for growing in. where did that come from? Did it come from a farm someplace, a played out farm that it's bad soil to start with, and part of the reason it's played out is because it's had, you know, tons and tons of chemicals over the last 30 years in it. Now you want to garden in that, so you kind of need to know that. So if you're looking at, if you have bought, or if you're looking at buying, if you can get a hold of the builder, see if they'll be honest with you and tell you, did they bring in soil to build with, and where did it come from, and has it been tested for chemicals, heavy metals, and things of that nature, because you'd like to garden in it. Okay, now kind of get light, a little bit lighter again, back to actual plants. If I say, I will pay and fund to help you start a garden, whatever kind of garden you want. What's the first vegetable that you want? Okay, first fruit, the first herb. What comes to mind when you think of a garden? Just write it down. That's probably the one you need to start with. Okay, what areas of your yard can you reasonably give to raising food crops? You can always mix flowers in with your produce, okay? So a lot of times we want that perfect lawn, especially in a neighborhood subdivision or something. We also want a garden, but you got to realize to put in a garden, you've got to take out some lawn, most likely, especially if you're doing the normal block garden. Or, again, you camouflage your garden by putting the garden plants in with all the ornamental plantings. A couple of different ways to go. Would you be willing to give up some of your lawn? Nice raised beds look lovely with a green lawn path for walking rows. Again, so get on, you know, go ahead and get on Pinterest or get online and look at pictures of gardens, see what gardening style, the aesthetic of it looks interesting to you, and maybe that's the direction you want to go. Now, be aware, of course, the more precise it looks, the cleaner it looks, the more raised beds and all that kind of stuff, the more money it's probably going to cost, and or time. So maybe if you like that look of an area, almost like the French, you know, French court, where they've got the really big ornamental gardens and designs and stuff out in front of the castle. Nothing says you can't have that in whatever space you've got, but you may not be able to do it all 1 year. You may need to put in one bed and some pathway around that, and then next year do a couple more beds and just kind of build it out over time. Think about your specific growing and garden zone. In the U.S., we call it frost hardiness. Now, it's not a panacea, it's not a one-size-fits-all. All 7Bs are not the same. I mean, I'm in northeast Arkansas, I'm 7B, I kind of act like it's 8. And up in the northeast, there are states way up, you know, in what I call Yankee land, that are 7B as well because they're close to the ocean. Yet their daylight's completely different. They get a lot of snow that we don't get. So 7B is not always 7B. And if you don't know what I'm talking about on 7B, look up U.S. hardiness zones. You need to know which one you're in. It at least helps when you're looking at seed packets or looking at seed to buy and something, what kind of plants will and will not grow in your area. Then just as a first broad stroke, they'll usually say, you know, hardy to zone 5, hardy, you know, between 6 and 9. So it gives you a starting place to find out or figure out if that may be something that will grow in your area. Do you have a long growing season or a short one? And what does that mean? Well, just about everywhere in the U.S. for the most part, at some point gets frost. So as you're coming out of winter and coming into spring, there will be a last frost of the year. And over the years and over the decades, they've kept track of that. And so there's kind of an average date that, on average, this is the day that beyond it, you're 50-50 chance you're not going to get any more frost. Okay, and you can just look that up. Whatever the nearest city, big city in your area is, or your zip code, just say last frost Memphis, in my case. Then as you're going through summer into fall and going into winter, there is a date that is, on average, is the first frost. Between that average Last frost and first frost is your growing season. How many days? Now that's a 50-50 chance. That doesn't mean that on some given year you may have a frost 3 weeks after, or you may not. That last frost may be 3 weeks before that, just depending on what happens that year. But on average, that's your growing season. Again, on your seed packets or the seed information, if you're growing from seed, it will have 65 days to maturity, 150 days to maturity. Well, if you've got a 100-day growing season, it's going to be difficult for you to grow anything that needs 150 days without some advanced techniques of starting indoors, using a greenhouse, a heated greenhouse, high tunnel, some other kind of a season extending method on the front or back end to give you enough days for that crop. Okay, what's your average rainfall per year and when does it come? There are places out in the desert that they might get 5 inches of rain a year. You need to know that because you're probably not going to be growing lots of leaf lettuce out in the baking sun if you don't have irrigation and don't have some way to shade it in an area that gets 5 inches of rain a year. If it's a tuber crop that needs lots of water to bulk up that tuber prior to harvest, it's going to be hard to do watermelons without irrigation where you get 5 inches of rain. In our area, on average, we get about 53 inches of rain a year, on average. Last year, 2019, we got over 72 inches. And our trend's been going this way. It's 2020, it's early February, we've already gotten over 7 inches. Okay? Now, obviously, I can't count on that much, but also, it's not even, part of it is how much do you get, but also, if you don't have a way to capture that and store it, be it in containers above ground or in the soil itself, or in ponds or something of that nature, when does it come? Last year, again, we got more than 20 inches, about 20 inches more than normal. So we were getting fairly consistent rains. I could have grown pretty much anything without irrigation up until about late July or August. And then the tap just went off. And we went at least a month and a half with nothing. I mean, the most moisture that we might have gotten might have been some dew on a few mornings. But other than that, nothing. And then it started raining again, and we still ended the year with 20 inches more than normal. So when do you get it? How long is that rainy season? Are you getting it every 3 to 5 days, getting, an inch, half an inch or something? Or are you getting 40 inches in 2 weeks, kind of a monsoon? That all comes into play in a lot of different ways. Do you get heavy snow or none at all? This area, we rarely get more than a dusting of snow, but every few years we get an ice storm. And we may get occasional hail. Okay. What plants do you see at your local nursery? And by nursery, there is Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, the big box places, and they tend to get theirs like from Bonnie or someplace like that. And for the most part, they're going to do fairly good at sending the plants to those big box stores that are appropriate for where that store is located. So they're not going to be sending normally a lot of fruiting banana plants to Wisconsin because they might sell them. Maybe if enough people want to buy them, they're going to put them up there. I mean, they'll sell anything that somebody will buy. But for the most part, they're going to send something that's appropriate. And when do they start showing up? Now, that doesn't mean that the first flat of those tomato plants that show up, you need to run out there, buy it, and stick it out. I rarely go to Walmart, but I did see at Home Depot the other day, it seemed like they were starting to put a lot more stuff out front, and I didn't really pay attention to what they were, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were some tomato plants out there. Well, we're still at least a month away from our average last frost, so without some kind of season extension, it would be pretty foolish of me to go buy those first tomato plants and go stick them outside. It may get down to 30 tonight. That'd be enough to do them in. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't be starting from seed. So I can be starting some stuff from seed here in the greenhouse or indoors where it's warmer, and be giving them a month, a month to be growing into those seedlings that you would be buying at the big box store for $4 each. And then when I'm sure that it's not going to frost anymore, or I've got a way to protect them, then I can transplant those out. How many I start depends on how much room I've got. If I'm doing them indoors with grow lights and stuff like that, I've only got so much space indoor that I can do that. And then you've got to worry about where you are indoors, because there needs to be a certain amount of moisture content. So you can't fill your living room with a bunch of plants that are going to be moist. You're going to end up with mold and mildew. So doing that, but there's many ways to do that. But pay attention to what's in the nursery. They're going to be, the more common things for your area. Look in your neighbor's yard. Look anywhere things are growing. So, if you're trying to figure out an ornamental plant and you see 5 people in your neighborhood with them growing and they seem to be thriving, then yeah, you can probably plant one and it'll do well. In my area, planting a blue spruce tree, it might survive. I mean, I got a neighbor that put one out, and they had it out there for, 5 or 10 years, and I don't think it ever got over 5 foot tall, and it went in at 3. It's just not appropriate for this area. Okay. Now here's another one that I kind of put in here. We talked about what do you like to eat? What do you know how to eat? What do you know how to prepare? Well, let's say you like winter squash. Okay? I like it. I know how to prepare it. And let's say that I put 10, and I live by myself, I put 10 of a certain winter squash, whatever it may be, plants out there, and I have a great year. I mean, I have a perfect year. So, I've got 10 plants. Each one puts on 5 to 10 squash. And of this variety, this is a medium one, small to medium. What do I do with them all? How do I store them? Well, luckily with winter squash, you don't have to do much of anything. But let's say I like cucumbers, and I planted 3 varieties of cucumbers. I did your regular pickling cucumber. I did a little gherkin, kind of little mini ones, the cucamelon kind of looking thing. And then I did some Armenian ones that are this long. And if anybody that's grown cucumbers knows, when they're doing well, it's kind of like zucchini. I mean, give me 10 plants and I could fill this easily once a day or more. What am I going to do with those? How many can you eat? You've got a family. How many ways can you do cucumbers before they get sick of it, and what are you going to do with all the extra? So do you know how to preserve whatever you're wanting to grow, assuming or preparing for an abundant harvest? Do you know how to preserve a significant amount of that so that you can have it through the rest of the year? Especially if you're wanting to garden for health reasons and to save money, it defeats the purpose to plant something that has a bumper crop, of which 80 to 90% of it you throw away. So it'd be much better to plant a smaller amount of that and be able to consume it, unless you know how to preserve it. Now, how can you preserve? Depending on what it is, you can pickle, you can freeze or vacuum pack and freeze, you can can. There's hot pack canning and there's cold canning. There's basically water bath and pressure canning. Some people, depending on what it is, can be smoked. There's all kinds of ways, things that can be preserved. Do you know how to do that? Do you have the equipment and the space and the time and energy to do that? Probably one of the 2 easiest to me are dehydrating. Various ways of doing that. You can do it with a dehydrator or not. If you decide to do that, do at least spend the money for a good dehydrator. And one of the surest ways to at least point you in the right direction is if it's got a temperature control. If it doesn't have a temperature control, it's probably not going to be one of your better dehydrators. So it's better to spend the money on a better one than to buy one that doesn't work very well and end up selling it at a yard sale for $1. But dehydrating, because once they're dried down, storing it's very easy. You just put it in an airtight container, stick it on a shelf someplace, you're good to go. I do a lot of dehydrating. Vacuum packing and freezing. You can just freeze in some good Ziploc type bags and other ways, meat wrapping. But if you don't mind spending a little bit of money, a good vacuum sealer. Yes, we're using a lot of plastic on that, but vacuum sealing and then freezing really helps with freezer burn. And that's probably one of the easiest, quickest, and easiest ways to preserve a lot of things. I'll do a lot of tomatoes, onions, squash. I even do beans, like cowpeas, purple whole peas, stuff like that. Dry beans. I'll even, something that I'm going to be storing for a long time, if I've got the freezer space. It's very fast to harvest it, go inside, wash it, slice it, throw it in a vacuum bag, vacuum it down, throw it in the freezer. I'm done. Now, a little bit more advanced is going to be your canning. You've got to source canning jars. They take up a lot of space. I've got 3 different places I've got them stored. You know, on average, they're probably $1 each, mason jars. Then you've got the lids and the rings. There are some techniques that you need to learn. If you don't know how, get with your extension office or find somebody near to help you learn how. What needs to be water bath, what needs to be pressure cooked. And you're going to get a lot of differing opinions on that, and there can be some fairly heated debates on, you know, there are people that, like, you know, we have water bath this for generations, and everyone that's alive has, you know, says it's fine. Yeah, everyone that's alive. What about the people that didn't survive? What did they die of? Just something to think of. Probably one of the, if you had one book reference to start with, it would be the Ball Canning book, the Ball Canning manual, and get as late as in, you know, as new a copy as possible. Some of the early ones, they have changed some of the recipes or some of the recommendations due to changes either in technology, in what they've been able to, you know, science has been able to tell us about what's safe, what's not safe, the availability of different additives, acidic sources, things like that. But if you had just one, that's the one I would get, and then learn the rest from other sources as well. But I mean, there are other ways that you may not have thought of about how to store in abundance, depending on what's going on. Like some of these squash, I think they've been frozen a few times out here. This is an unheated greenhouse. That doesn't mean that it's useless and that I'm not going to get some nutritional value from this, because I have chickens. So I can take almost any kind of vegetable food that may not be appropriate for me, but I can chop it up in little pieces and possibly, if I need to, even cook it a little bit or something. But I can feed it to my chickens, and then I get eggs and or meat. So I am storing or preserving this in an egg, in a chicken. Everything they eat, even if it's old stuff that I can't, everything that from my garden that they eat is feed I don't have to give them. So I can reduce my feed cost for the chickens, for meat and for eggs, by giving them old produce. Probably beat that horse long enough. Do you like caring for animals? If you're able in your location, rabbits, chickens, worms, a worm bin or something like that, they can feed you directly, indirectly, and or their manure can be used in composting for your garden. Rabbit manure can be used directly on the garden. I wouldn't put it right on a carrot or a beet that I'm going to be picking tomorrow and eating, but they can be used, they can be put anywhere without hurting the plant. Then it's just a matter of sanitation. Chicken manure, you don't really need to be putting directly on your edible plants, especially root plants and stuff like that. but it can be compost. It's a great source of nitrogen to heat up your compost and get it rocking and rolling, bacterial food, stuff like that. As Dr. Ingham would call it, party food, really get things going. You can put a light dusting of that sometimes around maybe some of your more perennials that are, you're not eating from right then. Some of your woody plants, bushes, flower, things, flower bushes you don't eat. If they need a boost of nitrogen, then you can use a little bit of the chicken. Don't put too much on it or you'll burn them and hurt them. Do you enjoy cut flowers in the house? There's no reason not to put flowers in your vegetable garden. A lot of flowers are actually edible, and they also bring in host and beneficial insects, arthropods, other things that will help you with the pest pressure. So I'm not a big flower person myself, but I definitely see the value and plan on increasing and adding a lot of flowers to my gardens, all three of them, for the beneficial insect and predator aspect. Are you a crafter? Okay. Do some loofah gourds, do some birdhouse gourds. Some of the beans that get really big and hard beans, or squashes and stuff like this, pumpkins, can be used in crafting. You can do ornamental corn. So glass gem corn, a lot of the Indian type corns and stuff, they're very ornamental. So you grow them and you can use them in the fall as decorations. And if it happens to be a popcorn, like the glass gem corn, then when you're done, you don't throw them away. You strip the kernels off the corn and then you pop them. So you get popcorn. You've gotten 2 to 3 uses out of that same plant. Okay, another thought. Are there significant sources of actual or possible pollution nearby, as in industrial, whether it's water runoff, smoke, smog, things of that nature? It could be the city doing their mosquito fogging, which in my area I keep trying to get them to stop, at least at my property, and instead they tend to go by 3 times a night. Agricultural, are you getting sprayed or oversprayed, especially with dicamba? Dicamba is one of the big ones right now, simply because it tends to just, depending on the weather conditions, it can kind of sit on top of the ground. It's not, it may, if there's a little bit of wind, it may blow off, but if there's none, it just kind of hovers there. It doesn't really just sink to the ground like a lot of them do. And then you get a little puff of wind and it can just drift, and it can land way, way away, the next field. It could be half a mile away and it'll get you. So if you're anywhere near conventional agricultural land, you've got a potential source of pollution there. Sound. If your garden is there for beauty and for food, but also just for respite, but you're underneath the flight path of an airport, or you're next to the interstate, or like in my area, I'm in the middle of a suburb, and people seem to think that one of my streets is a drag strip. That's going to disturb your peace a little bit. From a permacultural view, is there any significant amount or risk of some of the following, and where is it coming from? Fire. So is there a fire hazard? If so, what direction is that liable to come from, and can you mitigate that in some way? Wind. So if you're growing a lot of tall corn, but you have you're someplace where you tend to have a lot of wind that's going to blow it down, how can you mitigate that? Or do you need to do a shorter variety of corn or something of that nature? Water, whether it's rain, monsoon, whether it's flooding, what direction would that come from? That goes into siting and what kind of garden. You may need to do a raised bed, if you have a tendency of having some flooding in that area. Traffic, crime. I've got a lot of stuff planted in my front yard, so I've got to be cognizant of, and not militant about, but that people walking by or through may steal some of my produce. So basically the things I don't want them touching is in my backyard, and the things that if they happen to pick, I'm not too worried about, or extras, are in the front yard. And there are just many, many, many other things that can come into play if you're serious about starting gardening and achieving success. So kind of last thing. Number one, be patient. If you don't know who Charles Dowding is, pick your favorite gardening, but if you get on YouTube and look up Charles Dowding and you see his garden, That didn't come up, that didn't happen in 1 year or in a couple of months. So be patient. You'll get there if you stick with it. Take your time. And it does take a little bit of money at some point. It's probably going to take a little bit of money, but hopefully you're getting enough out of it to make it worthwhile, offset it, or even come out better in the end as far as what you would be paying for that produce or for those flowers since you grew it yourself. Number 2, make mistakes. For some reason, we've gotten to a point that we think that if we can't do it perfectly the first time, we shouldn't do it at all. Well, if that were the case, as Joel Salatin would say, we would never learn to walk. If your child or your nephew at 2 to 3 years old takes those first steps and everybody's, oh, look how good he's doing, all of a sudden he falls down on his bum, we don't start haranguing him and saying, look, kid, if you can't walk fine, right, you shouldn't even try. If you do it right or don't do it at all. We don't do that. We continue to encourage because we know those mistakes lead to eventual success. So embrace making mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. So seek to learn as much as possible. Meaning, make as many mistakes as possible. Do things another way not to do it. And you can tell somebody later, yes, I actually tried that and it did not work, and this is why I think it did not work, from experience. Your gardening style. If you don't mind chemical gardening, using the synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, poisons, all that kind of stuff, which is a typical way of gardening nowadays. Go in any big box store and there are walls and walls of garden chemicals. If that's what it takes to get you to garden to start with, okay, I would rather have you gardening than not gardening. If you're okay with that, then a great resource, and I'm sounding really negative on this, but go to the county extension office. It is funded by tax dollars, so it's not free. You have already paid for it, and everybody else has paid for it. But they can tell you, and they can help you say, okay, if you're going to use this container and you want success on it, then maybe go buy a couple of bags of Miracle-Gro, which has synthetic fertilizers in it. Fill it with Miracle-Gro potting soil, not topsoil, but potting soil. Get these plants, then go get you some Miracle-Gro liquid synthetic fertilizer, and then if you see aphids, use, here's the pesticide for this. If you see this pest, here's the fungicide for that. Very good, very knowledgeable, and if you follow the directions, it's not going to be an immediate poison to you. Obviously, you can tell what my bent is on using chemicals, but it will grow plants, it will grow food. Just about everything you buy in the store has been grown that way. So there's that. If you're not comfortable with that and you want to use a chemical-free or a no-till or something of that nature, find a mentor. Get online, see if there's anybody around. If you see somebody with a nice looking garden, stop and kind of find out how they garden. And find a mentor. They don't even have to be in your community. With Google Earth and YouTube and Facebook and all this, you can find a mentor somewhere that you can bounce questions off of, that does the style of gardening you're interested in, you're comfortable with. But find somebody. Go to classes, go to seminars, online classes, do a permaculture design course. If you want to try to do the mint lighter, square foot gardening, straw bale gardening, there's all kinds of online courses, videos about that kind of stuff. And read. I can't tell you how many books I have read on anything having to do with agriculture and gardening. But I can read forever. I can watch all the YouTube videos out there, but at some point I've got to get my hands dirty and actually do some of it, to actually be a gardener or actually be a farmer. And that's pretty much it. The last thing probably that I would have to say about getting advice and all this, and I think I may have said at the beginning, is if you truly want to find somebody that's going to help you learn how to garden or learn a new method of gardening, find somebody that asks questions of you and helps and tries to tailor their advice to you, your goals, your qualities, aptitudes, resources, in your context and living situation. People who just say, well, you need to go buy a tiller, buy some stuff from Johnny's Seeds, throw it out on this date, buy this hoe, these chemicals, and you're good to go. Okay, that's, in certain situations, that's going to work. You're going to grow something. But now you've got a tiller that you need to store. You've got another gasoline engine you need to maintain. If it's not ran often enough or stored properly, it's going to be more trouble than it's worth, because it's never going to run right after, you know, the first few uses. Or the electrical, using electrical, those are great, but now you've got the power cord to worry about, the safety issues. Maybe they say you need to buy a tiller, and you're in Arkansas. Okay, you need to buy a tiller, and you need to get this kind of sweet corn and this kind of squash and this fertilizer, and you're good to go. But they don't know you live on a mountain and you have no soil. Or they say, you know, this squash is the most prolific, it just takes over everything, and you're in an apartment. So seek out people who've got experience, as wide a variety of experience as possible. They don't have to have letters behind their name to be knowledgeable on this. There are value to those letters in diving deep into specific techniques and subject matters, but sometimes who you might need, at least for the beginning stages, is somebody who grew up on a farm that's been gardening for 40 years in 3 different locations, and they know how to kind of, you know, pivot and adjust to different situations to get something going. But they need to be asking questions, and then they need to be listening to help customize advice to you. Now, that being said, and I know with the YouTube and Facebook generation, and I'm one of them, I do this a lot, we expect to get customized, personalized information, hints, techniques that are guaranteed to work for free. Well, I have no problem. I'm eager to help somebody who knows less than me, just like I'm eager to find those who know more than me, to help them. But at some point, my time is worth something. My experience, my knowledge is worth something. So I'm not going to spend 40 to 80 hours a week handing out free customized advice just because I'm a good guy. So I'm kind of getting to the point now that I'll make some videos and I'll do some posts and stuff, but if you want me to really delve in deep and try to help you at whatever stage learn a new technique or learn how to garden or to build garden beds, you need to, I value my time, you need to value my time as well, and there may need to be some kind of an exchange. I go to seminars, I'll go to classes, and I pay for them. Okay, I don't expect everything to come for free. I have probably spent in the last year going to conferences, online courses, permaculture design courses and stuff, well over $5,000, $5,000 to $8,000, maybe $9,000 in the last 2 or 3 years, trying to get advanced training, because I believe these experts and what they have to offer is worth something. Even if it's not something I can use in my context, it's still good to know what's out there and what works in a different context. Just makes me a more well-rounded, knowledgeable person, I hope. And then I try it. So anyway, that's a long video, and I'll try to get a couple of bits edited out and get that posted up. If you're still watching this, I really thank you, and I'm kind of surprised, actually. But these are just some thoughts that really kind of been on my mind, especially this time of year, as I constantly see people, you know, giving a one or two sentence question, expecting to get a 1 or 2 sentence response personalized to them that's going to be completely, perfectly applicable and successful for them across everything. And it just doesn't work that way. You've got to put the time in. You've got to be willing to do some research. If you want to be self-sufficient, you've got to be able to do research on your own. Ask for advice, get help, but to be self-sufficient, You've got to be able to find the information, digest it, evaluate it, and use it by yourself. At least have that capability, and then supplement it with advice and stuff from others. But if you're having to have your hand held and the spoon, being spoon-fed everything at all times, that's not self-sufficiency. You've got to risk making mistakes. Make mistakes, embrace mistakes. Anyway, that should be enough. Thanks.